WWC's forever will I live, 'cause I just wanna give to nothing left for me.
Hi, welcome to the Corporate Culture Protest, the podcast where we refuse to normalize toxic workplaces and we unpack the games, the power plays, and the unspoken rules that keep them alive. I'm Arika, your workplace wellness advocate, and let me hand over to my co-host to say hi.
Good afternoon, Arika. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Jenna.
Afternoon.
Hi,
Good
Dr.
afternoon,
Chippo.
Jenna and Arika. Glad to be
Afternoon, Dr.
here.
Chipa.
Afternoon, how are you?
Good,
Well,
how are
thank
you?
It's Monday. Let's get this going.
Okay, let's start. Today, we're going to be pulling back the curtain on a question many of us have lived but really unpack out loud. Why do employees stay silent when they're treated unfairly? What keeps people from speaking up when the harm is obvious, but so are the risks? Let's talk about the silence problem. What does silence actually protect? And what does it cost? Jenna.
So, in terms of what it protects, the common one that employees experience most is of course fear of negative consequence. So if I speak up, will there be severe retaliation or labeled as a troublemaker? Will, you know, often what happens with employees who've stay silent is that they've tried before with no luck, or they don't trust HR, or their complaints have been dismissed. So they just don't trust the system, so they stay quiet. And of course, a desire to protect job security. So naturally, when you're in this environment of fear and a countrywide situation where jobs are scarce, your instinct is, I don't want to lose my job. So you stay quiet. And so the consequences of these psychologically, of course, is chronic stress and anxiety. Because imagine every day coming to work to this. I'm experiencing this trauma and abuse and this fear, but if I speak up, there'll be dire consequences. So naturally, there'll be high levels of stress and anxiety, which can ultimately result in depression or just emotional exhaustion, where it just becomes too much. You don't want to get out of bed every morning. The environment is too overwhelming, and you just become too afraid to speak out. And so as a result of that, you may develop a thing called learned helplessness. Because you have taught yourself that, or not taught yourself, but learned that speaking up will result in dire consequences, it's almost like you learn to feel helpless to the point where you just come to work, pay the bills, and go home. And then what also happens then to maybe make yourself feel better is you start saying things like, I deserve this. Maybe I provoked, or maybe it's my personality. In other words, you start self-gaslighting. And this is quite common as well. Ultimately, though, Erica, two things happen right at the end of that, is that there's reduced job engagement and motivation, where you basically come, do your job and go home. And then an increased intention to leave the company, which means even though initially you need to pay the bills, the overwhelming nature of the stress becomes so much that eventually resignation becomes a common consequence. Yeah?
Yeah, that sounds accurate, actually. Very accurate. Dr. Chippo, do you have anything to add?
No, maybe maybe it just came to my mind as Jenna was speaking, that the self gaslighting that happens. I think the system itself, how it's structured, and maybe a lack of response to whatever you would have aired out as your grievances, also gets to condition you to act in ways that, like Jenna said, you end up self gaslighting. You begin to question yourself, you second guess your decisions to a point where you literally are walking on eggshells every time you're in the workspace. And I think there's nothing as horrendous as going to your workplace and acting as if you are walking on eggshells every turn you make. Because now every move you make, every decision you make, you're questioning yourself, you are debating in your head, you are having to internalize things that shouldn't be internalized, and you're literally sponge bobbing everything that's happening around you to a point where it becomes very unhealthy and very toxic, that the end result would be you just literally resigning without even having a plan B, because you get to a point where you say my mental health matters more than me showing up and continuing to experience this on a daily basis. So the extreme moments of things would have you putting in a resignation without a plan B, which is very terrible if you are maybe to consider people in circumstances like my own circumstances where I'm a foreigner, and to be fighting the systems then to secure a new job as a foreigner, as a woman in a country where already there are things in place that make it difficult to even secure the first job you have, becomes it's disastrous to say the least.
Yeah, it sounds very difficult.
And
Jenna,
and on that, yeah, just to add there, just on that point of the self-gaslighting is every time an incident happens, you keep saying, "Oh, this isn't such a big deal," or there's chronic self-doubt. So, and then what ends up happening with the self-doubt, and I've seen this in employee wellness, is that it ends up mutating, or not mutating, but going into other areas of your work. So you
Mm,
start doubt speaking up, and then that self-doubt starts showing itself in your decision making, in your
mm,
how long it takes you to finish things in your work, in your productivity.
mm,
In other words, that
mm.
self-doubt starts mutating and goes into other areas of your work, not just the act of speaking up. That's kind of a domino effect that you can see from this.
yeah,
Mm,
of course. And then the
mm.
confidence levels as well, because
The
you,
confidence,
yeah,
exactly.
you understand what you need to do, but then you afraid to put your hand up and say, I need something in order to complete this task, because now you're worried about what are they going to say. And then the lack of trust, in management and in HR, I don't think it's unjustified. I feel like that lack of trust comes because people have raised their hands and said, look, I need something, or can I have a conversation with you, only for it to be used against you at some point.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's
mm.
what creates that lack of trust in corporate spaces. And the feeling of, you hear it so many times, you see so many memes, HR is not to be trusted.
Mm, mm.
Sometimes I feel it's unfair because you meet HR people that are truly there to help culture along and to make sure that the employees are taken care of. And then, like, a
Mm,
Mm.
majority of HR departments are just there to collect information that they can feed to the management. And then all of a sudden, people start getting victimized. So I've seen that a lot where they collect information and then it's used against people. So that's why people don't want to raise their hands. I don't know whether it's a tactic. So if we get them to stay silent, we won't have to deal with any issues.
Mm, mm. And all those things, when you bring that up, all those things speak to a culture of poor communication or a lack of transparent communication. Because why do
mm,
people gossip? Why do people stand by the sort of water cooler and talk? Why do they get anxious? It's because from management in the first place, or leadership or HR, they didn't clearly state the processes of speaking up, or encourage it in the first place. Or say if there are concerns, we can have a conversation about this in the first
mm,
place. So
mm,
it's not transparent in the first place, and then when you do something
mm,
wrong, it's you're suddenly in trouble. So it's the leadership ethos in the first place, and specifically a
mm,
lack of transparent communication.
No, it's true, Jenna. And we use the word leadership all the time, but like I just feel like it's not justified in a lot of places. You have to say
Mm.
management, because true leadership is about care, and
Yeah,
it's about
mm,
leading your staff in such a way where this sort of toxic culture is not there. It doesn't exist if you
yeah.
have proper leadership. So yeah, it's one of those things I like notice it all the time now when people say, leadership says, but I'm like, I have not seen leadership in this place ever.
Mm.
It's that
Yeah.
type of of thing where you just think, why do they say that? Why do they keep on using that word leadership when no one is leading?
Well,
Um,
also, to follow up with that regarding manager versus leader and this issue of being silent. So the way I see it, Arika, is management's about doing things right, whereas leadership's about doing the right thing. So often where companies are afraid or there's financial stresses, they just want the employees to get in line and do their thing because they need to tick boxes because maybe there's a fear of catastrophe or a financial collapse or something. So then if you speak up as an employee, it's equivalent of you're going to upset the apple cart to such a degree that you're going to affect
mm,
our organization. But I can absolutely assure you, one random employee is not going to affect who speaks up on something, is not going to affect the whole organization. But that's what happens. It's you must just get in line because there's this constant fear of catastrophe. So get in line, do what you need to do, so we can kind of keep the status quo. And that's something I've
Mm.
seen regularly. Yeah.
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us
But
to the
but
next point. So we talk about when support is just a policy. Why do so many companies say they care, but people are still burning out in silence? Dr. Chibo.
I think sometimes it boils down to how the system itself is structured. I think the fact that it's very much a bureaucracy, it's a bureaucratic system where sometimes you end up getting drained from trying to put your point across, air your grievances because you are being moved from one office to the next office to somebody in this office who's meant to deal with this thing, but nothing gets done. I
Mm-hmm.
think more for me, the problem also comes with this whole procedure of trying to say things need to be done in this way and bureaucratically it has to be moved from one place to the other to this individual and that individual. But you find that as that happens, things get lost in translation, information gets lost along the way to a point where if you as an employee have something you are very much grieving over, the fact that you are made to do the runarounds to see this person and that person who probably never responds to your emails or your communication, it ends up draining you. It becomes very frustrating to a point where you end up just saying, you know what, let me just leave it. Because I've been given the runaround by 20 people, and clearly there's a lot of so called offices I need to approach for this, but clearly there's nobody who's hands on to the problem that is at hand. So I think how the system is structured as well gets to frustrate the employees to a point where following up becomes such a tedious process that you end up just absorbing things and saying, you know what, it's pointless for me to say this because nothing ever gets done.
Yeah,
Mm,
creating the
yeah.
silence again. Yeah.
And the nothing gets done results in that as I was mentioning earlier, that learned helplessness. And then you have the risk
Hmm.
of the motivation and then the resignation. So sometimes you even wonder if that's a tactic. Like, let's just let the employee burn themselves out, let them try, and when they get too tired, it doesn't matter, we'll replace them with someone else. I
Mm.
say that cynically, but just yeah, what you've mentioned there, Dr. Cheapo, is a frequent thing that happens where you just keep trying and trying, and you feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I think, and you're right to say it's systematic because I think there's this culture that's also been perpetuated and promoted to bring across the impression to say if you fall off the wagon, we can easily replace you with somebody. Well, that's capitalism
Mm.
for you. So
Yeah.
the fact
Absolutely.
that there's always it's always sometimes even overtly put out there to say, you know, even if we lose you today, we can have somebody else take your position tomorrow. So there's nothing particularly special
Mm.
about you as an individual
That's it.
because we can always get somebody to burden with another 3 4 modules that you're taking if you feel like you can't take it anymore. So sometimes it's made very clear in the space there's that devaluation that puts across the message to you very clearly and loudly to say, you're not that important. You are not indispensable. We can always find somebody to take over. So don't even think for a second that you are that important to us to want to stretch ourselves to accommodate you and make you feel at home, because there's somebody who's out there who's very desperate to take the position that you're in right now.
You know, what
Mm.
you're saying, Dr. Chiba, is very interesting. There's a phrase in social psych class that I lectured called moral disengagement, where what used to happen with sort of authoritarian governments is that they would they would try and get you to justify your lack of compassion for another group by continually saying that they're a threat. Um, and so that would get you not to care about them or whatever it is. So the question I ask in the corporate space is, how has it got to a point where management or leadership have got to a point where they can morally disengage from
Mm.
employees' struggles or anxieties or pressure or stress or breakdowns? Why is there this compassion deficit, where you don't see the level of hostility in your environment, or don't care to see it, or are indifferent to it? Where does that come from, or why does that come about to the point where a person is, as in our topic today, afraid to speak up? Do you see what I'm saying, Dr. Chifa?
I do. And I think it comes down to the point of, for them, it's transactional. It's
Yeah,
capitalism. The point is to maximize on the profit. So morality aside, we don't care about your feelings, we don't care about humanity, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make a profit, and we do not care who we trample upon as we become very much blinkered in our quest for what we are
yeah,
aiming to achieve. So if we are gunning for profits, if we are gunning for the ultimate, let's just make a killing out of this. Why should we invest in people and care about their well-being? Because ultimately we want to maximize on profit, and outside of capitalism there's nothing else that capitalism is concerned about. I
wow,
guess that's
wow.
that for me. That's part of where it comes from, I guess.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. Wow,
it does. And
sure.
management somehow feels like they're untouchable.
No, they do,
Yeah,
hey? They
Yeah.
do. They do.
They can't do
yeah,
anything wrong, but everyone else can be doing something wrong. So whatever someone else does is wrong, and they can make it seem wrong even if it isn't. And they can
And
control
when
the
there's such
narrative.
arrogance,
Mm,
exactly. And when there's such arrogance, who then do you turn to?
that's it.
sure. So what's interesting is, in order for greed to thrive, it requires a lack of compassion. Sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Wow. Goodness.
So here's the thing. How do we break the cycle? What are the real
Yeah.
steps we can take towards a culture where speaking up is actually safe? I mean, I've been in environments where, someone leaves and then they don't hire someone to replace the person that's left. They distribute the job or the tasks of the person that's left to other
Mm,
people.
mm,
And then it happens again and again. And now you are working with three job descriptions, but not one
mm.
person is picking up their hand to say, this is wrong. We don't have capacity to do this.
Mm, mm. Yeah, because they're afraid in the first place, and that's what it comes down to for me. As I said earlier, when employees see leaders as transparent, employees feel valued. So what I'm
Mm,
hearing from you, for example, is there was no transparency as to why this is being done. Remember, transparency is not telling you everything that's going on.
Mhm.
Transparency is giving you context for decisions made. So at the very least, to have that from a leader is um, having that level of transparency, and establishing clear, accessible channels. Because what I'm also hearing from your example, Arika, is that your understanding of what's going on, it doesn't sound accessible in terms of understanding why this is happening. And that's also where people get stressed, because one of the biggest stresses is the unknown when you don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Um, And so what ends up happening after that, or one of the reasons also is that when you have that gripe, there isn't a kind of prompt or fair response. You've got to wait forever and ever, or there's no clear response, and then that makes you more stressed. You see what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Other ideas, I mean, how do we protect employees from retaliation? In other words, so if you want to speak up, how do you know that if you speak up, there won't be a retaliation? How do you, what
That
assurance do you have, you know? And that's what I mean by this kind of transparency, Erica?
Yes, that's true. I mean, if you felt that you could trust management, you could go up to them and say, listen, I don't think that I would be able to do these three job descriptions. It is becoming a lot. I'm going to drop
Mm.
the ball. But you can't say that because you don't know what they're going to do. They're unpredictable. They're going to find some way to victimize you, some way to say that, oh, you're incompetent if you can't do all of this work. There's no talk about, oh, let's increase your salary. This is what we're doing. We cannot replace this person. It's going to take us a year. So, we're going to shift these responsibilities to you. It's not a clear.
Like there are no incentives in place.
No,
There's
nothing.
nothing to incentivize you taking on a lot and more than you can chew. Like literally, I think it also boils down to the whole idea I feel it's very systematic in the way that it happens. The bullying tactics, the fact that whatever you then say or however you decide to move gets weaponized against you becomes very dangerous. And somehow I don't know, it even feels like it's a whole regime that's in place to make sure that management is very much on point with the bullying tactics. I don't know if there's some kind of course that happens before people take up positions in management to say this is like honestly, I'm yet to meet somebody who's not terrified with dealing with management because there's always something that comes up that
Yeah.
vilifies employees, that gets you to become the scapegoat when you don't even want to be. All you're trying to do is to air out grievances in the workspace. But the fact that it becomes a public display of it, it becomes a public show in some instances to make you the scapegoat. For me, it even feels as if, I don't know, I have something in the back of my mind that feels like there's some kind of ritual or rite of passage that management goes through to say terrorize them until you get them to be exhausted enough to just quit.
Sounds like it. I mean, they should have a course where they have learn compassion or learn to be more compassionate. It looks like on these courses that you speak of, Dr. Chippo, it's like take the compassion away completely and let's just rule with fear.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense, but we're there.
And if I'm hearing Dr. Chipo's example earlier regarding the transactional nature of the work and capitalism and replaceable, when you have that kind of a system, so transactional, replaceable, greed, capitalism, then what you end up fostering is a turf war or a competition among employees. And so what happens then is if you speak up or show talent, you then seen as a threat to someone else's position, someone else is higher than you, which means that can then nullify empathy or nullify or if you call someone out, a manager, then they think, oh, I'm going to lose my job, so they threaten you first. So how from the outset, the leadership to foster empathy, listen actively, to encourage participation, and reward speaking up. But make it clear that using your voice is a strength. And the problem is that it's seen that using your voice is something to be afraid of, and quite frankly, is undemocratic because you have a right to your voice, freedom of speech. Hey, Dr. Keefer?
Not true, because essentially what the system then does, like you're saying, employees against each other. That's then where you have the one who is then become the supposedly whistleblower who's gossiping in the foyer by the water thingy, because now we have those who are trying to be, oh, this is what this one is saying, so I want to be the good guy, good cop, bad cop type of situation there. So you end up, like you're saying, the system gets to pit you one against each other, one against the other, which at the end of the day, then it's ridiculous to say the least, because now if we are then working in competition, then we are not building anything towards something progressive as a team. We are already divided. And when we are working as a divided team, then it becomes a dog eats dog type of situation where I'm selfishly looking out for my interests, looking out for myself. So if it means I'm going to throw Jenna under the bus so that I elevate myself in the system, it ends up happening. You end
Yeah.
up finding people. No wonder then we spoke about, you even spoke about the whole idea of, Arika spoke about having information weaponized against you. Because now if we are pitted against each other, then I'm going to say something to make myself look good to management so that I can be rewarded. I can then be promoted. I can get favor over you. So if it means I'm going to throw you under the bus to advance my position in the system, then trust me, people are ready to do that. So the whole concept of morality, the whole concept of even being empathetic in the workplace then doesn't exist, because we are all then ending up looking out for our selfish individual interests, because by our nature we are inherently very selfish and very self-centered. It takes being in a system where you then get encouraged to work with others for the good of everybody, the utilitarian sense of being in a community. But if that is not fostered, you end up then in a situation where these kind of scenarios happen, where we throw each other under the bus to benefit ourselves and individually gain at the expense of the next employee.
Yeah. No, that is absolutely spot on. Because when you say stuff, even if you then what the other thing that happens is that when you start then sharing your grievances, the ones you share it to, you're thinking, can I trust this person? Who do they know?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Or then if you use the employee wellness provider to help you, you don't know then who's going to know that information. So you then don't use it, or you worry about confidentiality, or you worry about
Mm.
the service is not independent. So the leadership ideally should promote an employee wellness provider, but the problem is that when you
Mm.
have these cultures, the employees are worried that the employee wellness provider isn't independent from management. So now
Yeah.
they end up not using it, or they don't trust it. So yeah, which means you have then social isolation and just people staying by themselves, and thinking then that the employee wellness provider is not effective. Yeah, and then you have the risk of resignation. Hey, Erica?
No, that's true. Um, I see, the thing about not being able to trust, or that's also, it's terrible because you can't speak up. You can't share with a colleague what you're going through. You can't share with the HR. You can't share it with your manager because you don't know what that information is going to be used for.
Yeah,
And that's where I
exactly.
feel like the change needs to come about, because like I always say, employees are there to be productive. They're there to achieve the company's goals. And how are you going to do that if you are more worried about other things that are not relevant to your
Yeah,
job? But they,
because even
yeah.
yeah, because even if you see nowadays sports teams in the olden days, you'd have the team and the coach. But now sports teams have realized you can't just have a team and a coach. You have the physio, the masseur, the sports psychologist, because they
Mhm.
realize that players are multiple things can affect performance. But that doesn't seem to have translated into the corporate world, that a
Mhm.
psychological thing can affect performance. Or they may see it. They'll say, let's have an employee wellness provider, but it's window dressing.
Mhm.
So again, it comes down to me that empathy deficit, or lacking
Mm.
EQ, and that's
Mm.
where again the importance of psychoeducational training is important, and Because even if or company does have an employee wellness provider, will the management have the EQ to know when to use it and to not use it when things are so bad? You know what I'm saying?
That's true. That's true. Ladies, we've unpacked so much today and our time is running out.
Oh,
So thank you guys again. I just want to let
Yeah.
our audience know, if you've ever stayed silent to protect yourself, it doesn't mean that you're weak. You were just navigating a system that made it unsafe to speak. But silence doesn't have to be the final chapter. Next week, we're going to talk about panic attacks. Have you ever had a panic attack at work? Because the reality is many of us have, and most workplaces aren't equipped to handle it with dignity or care. Until next time, remember your voice matters, your well-being matters, and don't let the system tell you otherwise. Thanks again. Bye.
I
Thank you.
Immortal lyrics is forever will I live. Cause I just wanna give till nothing left in me.